Basel, Switzerland, 12th of February, 2009. An entirely ordinary family is spending Saturday afternoon at the shopping mall, unaware that in just a few minutes their entire lives will be marked by a sentence impossible to ignore. While the father flips through magazines and the mother browses a shelf of children's books, their 5-year-old daughter walks a few steps ahead to a table displaying new releases. Among colorful covers, illustrated fairy tales, and young adult novels lies a single book bearing a black and white photograph, The Diary of Anne Frank. The girl stops motionless in front of that image. Her hands freeze at chest height. Her eyes fix on the face of the dark-haired teenager with the serious gaze. At that moment, without raising her voice, the girl declares with absolute certainty that she knows this girl. In her mind, it is not merely a historical photograph, but something far more intimate. In her own perception, she is not seeing a person distant in time. She is seeing herself. The feeling of recognition is so intense that her breathing rhythm changes. She does not behave like a curious child before a new picture. She behaves like someone who has rediscovered a memory. The mother approaches, expecting the usual childish reaction: interest in the book, questions about the cover, comments on the black and white. Instead, she encounters an expression far too serious. The girl keeps her eyes glued to the photograph, as if the rest of the world has ceased to exist. When the mother tries to lift the book from the table so it will not be damaged, the girl clutches the cover with a strength that has nothing to do with an impulsive gesture. In the minutes that follow, the mother notices something even more disturbing. The girl is not merely looking at the image, she is behaving as though she already knows the story behind it. As she will later express in indirect speech, she is not discovering who Anne Frank was. She is remembering what,
for her, had been a previous life. At that age, she can barely read simple sentences. She has never heard of the diary. Concentration camps have never been mentioned at home, nor the Second World War, nor persecutions. The family avoids those subjects in front of the child, and yet she displays absolute certainty. On the way home, the parents try to interpret the incident as simple, passing curiosity. They think perhaps the photograph impressed her, or that she is repeating something overheard at kindergarten. Soon, however, they discover that the episode in the bookstore was only the beginning. In the days that follow, the girl begins to show small but constant changes in everyday behavior. Suddenly, she insists that the curtains in the house must always be drawn once evening falls. She grows anxious when she hears ambulance or police sirens in the street, although previously she never paid them any attention. Several times, she asks her parents to turn off the living room light and speak in whispers, as though fearing discovery by someone beyond the walls. The mother initially attributes these gestures to childish fears. Yet one detail unsettles her. The girl does not speak of monsters, shadows, or invented figures. She speaks, in simple words, of men searching for hidden people, of footsteps in shoes on stairs, of knocking on wooden doors. She does so in a calm voice, without drama, as someone describing something already experienced. The second clear sign that something extraordinary is occurring appears one evening at dinner. The family is casually chatting about the possibility of going to the seaside or the mountains in summer. The girl, not participating in the conversation, is drawing on a sheet of paper placed beside her plate. When the mother notices the drawing, she freezes. It is not ordinary scribbling. The girl has drawn the floor plan of an interior space, a narrow hallway,
several rectangular rooms,
a staircase hidden behind what looks like a movable bookcase.
The mother asks in indirect speech what the place is. The girl answers quite naturally that it is a house where one lived in hiding. She explains in simple words that one had to walk quietly, that the toilet could not be flushed at certain hours, and that the sound of distant bells marked the passage of time. She uses no proper names or historical terms, but the description is clear. For her, that space is not invented. It is a memory. Disturbed, the mother hides the drawing in a drawer. That same night, once the girl is asleep, she turns on the computer and searches for information about the house in Amsterdam where Anne Frank is said to have hidden. When she finds the plan of the so-called secret annex, a chill runs down her spine. The narrow hallway, the staircase hidden behind a bookcase, the arrangement of the rooms, everything coincides in a disturbing way with what the girl drew. Even the approximate position of the windows matches the points of light the girl marked. The mother calls the father so he can see with his own eyes. Both compare the childish drawing with the real plan, almost intuitively superimposing them. Neither can explain how their daughter, who has never been to Amsterdam, who has seen neither documentaries nor books about the Second World War, can reproduce that place with such accuracy. Sleep is almost impossible that night. In the following days, the girl begins to introduce isolated words that confuse the family even more. Sometimes she uses terms that do not belong to her native language. The mother of Swiss origin and the father of German origin notice that the girl produces sounds reminiscent of another language. At certain moments, she mentions names the parents initially take for inventions. She refers to a clearly Dutch surname, speaks of a building with a facade by a canal, and of a city where, in her words,
It was always cold inside, even though people were nearby.
When the mother asks in indirect speech where she might have heard those words, the girl replies that she remembers them from the time when she lived above an office and had to remain silent during the day. Once again, the expressions do not fit the typical fantasy of a 5-year-old. There are no fantastic elements, no magical characters. There are only concrete descriptions of rooms and situations, linked to a constant feeling of controlled fear. The powerful revelation of this first block comes on a Sunday afternoon when the family visits the maternal grandparents. In the living room stands an old illustrated encyclopedia that no one has opened in years. The girl opens it at random and, without searching, lands on a page about the Second World War. Among the images is a small photograph of the facade of the building on Prinsengracht where the Frank family hid. The girl freezes. Her hands tremble slightly. Instead of turning the page, she leans over the photograph and, as the mother will later recount, recognizes the building as the place where, in her memories, she had lived in hiding. Spontaneously, she mentions that behind those windows was a room where she felt safe only at times, and that the rear part of the building was darker than the front. For her, it is not a discovery. It is confirmation. The mother decides to conduct a test. Without explaining anything to the girl, she shows her several printed photographs of various old European houses, mixing in recent images of the Amsterdam annex. The girl remains indifferent to most. Yet the moment she sees the facade of the real hiding place again, she reacts exactly the same way. Breathing accelerates, gaze focuses, hands clutch the paper. She does not hesitate and does not confuse the building with any other. She recognizes it every time.
That night, the parents sit at the dining table with an improvised collection of evidence.
The drawing of the annex plan,
The isolated words the girl should not know, the physical reactions to photographs she had never seen. They begin to note dates, details, sentences. They realize that what is happening far exceeds any childish game or coincidence. With time, specialists in reincarnation and psychologists interested in anomalous memory phenomena will regard this complex of events as the beginning of one of the strangest and best documented cases in recent history. At that moment, however, for these two parents it was merely a terrifying reality. Their 5-year-old daughter appeared to remember with impossible accuracy the life and captivity of a Jewish teenager who had died decades earlier. And what they had seen so far, disturbing as it was only the first layer of the mystery. The truly unsettling part would begin when the girl started to speak, not just of the house where she had hidden, but of writing a diary, of the people who lived with her, and of the end she insists she had already experienced once. In the weeks following the bookstore incident, the atmosphere in the house changed quietly but steadily. The girl no longer reacted only to images related to Anne Frank. She began spontaneously to introduce memories that seemed to belong to another era, another life, another identity. She did so without drama, without seeking attention. For her, it simply seemed part of who she was. The first clear indication of this new phase appeared one afternoon in her room. The mother found her sitting on the floor with an open notebook and a pencil between her fingers. She was not drawing isolated figures, houses, or flowers. She was filling the page with tightly packed lines of writing. At that age, she could barely write a few letters of her own name. Yet on the paper, there was a sequence of marks running in an orderly direction, with regular spacing and a structure imitating real text. When the mother came closer, she noticed something even more disturbing. Among the strokes, she recognized isolated words, written clumsily but legibly. House, hiding place, diary. The girl had not yet formally learned to write those terms. At kindergarten, they worked only with simple syllables. Nevertheless, they appeared on the sheet, placed as though she were trying to reconstruct an already known sentence. The mother set the notebook aside without immediate comment. That night, while the girl slept, she quietly leafed through the pages. On many of them, the same pattern repeated. Lines of strokes imitating continuous writing, and among them, groups of letters resembling Dutch words recalled from memory. They were not perfect, but they resembled terms the mother later identified by comparing them with excerpts from Anne Frank's diary found online. The similarity was too great to be coincidence. The second major warning came in the form of recurring nightmares. Until then, the girl had slept peacefully. Now she began to wake up frightened between 3 and 4 in the morning. The parents would find her sitting in bed, her pajamas soaked with sweat, breathing rapidly, with an expression of controlled fear. She did not scream. She did not hysterically demand comfort. Rather, she seemed to be reliving something she could not get out of her head. Over time, she was able to describe to her parents, in simple language, what woke her. She spoke of footsteps climbing the stairs, of voices arguing behind a door, of sharp knocks on wood. In her accounts, there were no monsters or invented creatures, only men searching for other hidden people. Several times she mentioned, with a precision that froze her parents' blood, that the greatest fear was not the noise, but the moment when everything fell silent and no one dared breathe. The mother noted every detail in a notebook. She recorded the time of waking, the words used, the tone of voice. Later,
Comparing them with historical descriptions of the arrest of the Frank family, she found disturbing parallels. The approximate time, the way the annex residents had described the pounding on the door, the feeling of waiting before discovery. The girl did not know those accounts, yet she used almost identical images. The next step in the escalation of the mystery was more direct. The girl began to refer to herself in the past with a name that was not hers. Not constantly and not as a game. It happened at specific moments, usually after a writing episode or a nightmare. In her childish way of expressing herself, she assured them that she had previously been another person, a teenager who hid and wrote about her feelings. That teenager was called Anne. She did not present it as fantasy, but as fact that, in her mind, was as real as the present. The mother first tried to interpret these statements as imaginative play, but there was a crucial difference. The girl did not behave like someone pretending to be a character. She did not demand to be called that. She did not invent scenes for play. She simply explained, with the disturbing seriousness of a child speaking of something that weighs on her, that before being born into this family, she had been someone else. The turning point came when the kindergarten began to notice unusual behavior. One afternoon, the teacher asked to speak with the parents. Carefully, she explained that the girl had surprised the entire group during an art activity. While the other children colored houses and animals, she had drawn with pencil a narrow, tall, rectangular window with dark curtains on both sides. Beneath the window, a simple desk with an open notebook on it. The teacher noted that when asked what she was thinking about while drawing, the girl answered in indirect speech that it was her favorite place to write, but often she could not use it because she had to be quiet.
She added that it made her sad when the sky outside was beautiful and she could not go out.
The teacher did not understand the context, but recognized a deep emotional charge in those words. When the parents saw the drawing, their breath caught. The scene matched the known photographs of the small desk by the window in the annex where Anne Frank wrote her diary. The furniture placement, the type of window, even the sense of confinement in the lines, all corresponded exactly to that place. The girl had never seen those images. From that moment, the mother decided to consult a child psychologist. She did not mention reincarnation or Anne Frank directly. She described only the nightmares, the drawings, and her daughter's sentences. The specialist considered it possible that the girl had unconsciously absorbed adult conversations or fragments of news. He recommended observation but downplayed the idea of an inexplicable phenomenon. The situation became harder to ignore, however, when a new element appeared. Fragments of a language the girl had never learned. At certain moments, especially when tired or after a nightmare, her intonation changed, and she uttered isolated words that belonged neither to German nor to the local dialect. The father, who had Dutch colleagues at work, recognized some sounds as very similar to Dutch. Curious, he secretly recorded one such incident. Later, he played the audio for a Dutch-speaking colleague without explaining whose voice it was. The colleague, after listening several times, confirmed that they were not complete sentences, but isolated words pronounced with a surprisingly childlike Dutch cadence. He recognized terms related to house, fear, and hiding place, mixed with unintelligible sounds, as though the girl were trying to reconstruct a language she no longer fully mastered in its current form. The strongest revelation of this second block occurred when the girl, who had never read the original diary, began to describe scenes that exactly matched specific passages in the book. Once, during a car ride, she persistently complained about the sound of footsteps on the street, although they were barely audible. She then explained in simple words that such noises made her nervous because previously she had to sit still for hours so that no one would know she lived above an office. At home, the mother searched a digital edition of the diary and found several passages in which Anne described exactly the same feeling: the fear that office employees or passers-by would discover the people upstairs. The match was not general, it was specific. The girl emphasized details that point by point coincided with the experiences of the presumed diary author. The emotional climax of this block occurred on a winter night when a power outage plunged the building into darkness. The family lit candles and tried to stay calm. The girl, noticing the lack of electricity, displayed a reaction they did not expect. It was not the darkness itself that frightened her. What disturbed her was the echo of her own footsteps on the floor. She walked with extreme caution, placing her feet with exaggerated gentleness, as though fearing someone below or beside her might hear. At one point, she stopped abruptly and, as the mother would later recount, adopted a bodily posture reminiscent of someone listening intently for outside noises. She was not playing. She was not performing for anyone. In some way, she was reconstructing a state too refined to have emerged from the imagination of such a young child. The next day, the parents gathered all the elements once more: drawings, words, reactions, nightmares, descriptions. They realized that what their daughter displayed was a fragmentary reconstruction of a previous life. A life marked by captivity, fear, and writing as the only means of expression. From then on, whenever the girl assured them in the third person that she had previously been another person named Anne, that sentence no longer sounded like play, but weighed like a disturbing possibility. And the most unsettling part was still to come. The moment when the girl would begin to reproduce intimate details from Anne Frank's life that do not appear in the published texts, but are known only to researchers and direct relatives. Over the weeks, the family began to notice that the girl's behavior no longer occurred in isolation. Each incident connected to the previous one, as though she were gradually reconstructing a chain of memories that did not belong to her brief life. What had begun as drawings, isolated words, and emotional reactions became increasingly precise descriptions full of details that exceeded any reasonable explanation. One of the first indications of this new phase appeared in the morning when the mother opened the drawer of the girl's desk to store school supplies. Among colored sheets, she found a small notebook the daughter had secretly filled. On those pages, there were no illustrations, only straight lines imitating entire paragraphs, as though she were trying to reproduce a long text. The mother turned the pages carefully and was left speechless. Among the childish strokes, a word repeated several times, clumsily but recognizably: Margot. The mother knew that name belonged neither to a friend, nor a teacher, nor any relative. It had never been spoken at home. Yet the girl had written it again and again, accompanied by figures depicting two girls, one smaller, one taller. When the mother gently asked what those drawings meant, the girl replied that this person was important in the memories of the time when she wrote in silence. She said it without exaggerated emotion, with the naturalness of someone speaking of a piece of their own life. Unease grew when the father decided to conduct a small home experiment. He printed several old photographs of unknown young women and slipped among them a less familiar image of Margot Frank. He showed all the photographs to the girl without any hint. She looked at each calmly, but stopped at Margot. She did not point to her as a familiar face and showed no childish curiosity. She gazed with strange silence and placed her hand on the image with unusual tenderness. As she later expressed, that girl seemed familiar to her, as though she belonged to a distant memory that still hurt. Another disturbing incident occurred during a family walk in a nearby park. The girl stopped in front of an artificial canal and stared at it for several minutes. Not like a child wanting to play with water, with deep, almost nostalgic attention. She commented that such canals reminded her of the city where she had lived before, a city full of water everywhere. The words were simple, yet the emotion behind them revealed a deeper connection than an ordinary, spontaneous remark. The family had never been to Amsterdam. They had seen neither documentaries nor children's books with pictures of that city. No one spoke of its architecture or canals, yet the girl described them as though she had known them for years. One day, while the mother was secretly reading fragments of Anne Frank's diary, something she did in hiding so as not to influence the child, something happened that paralyzed her. She was thinking of a passage mentioning one of the women in the annex, Augusta van Pels, known for her restless character. At that exact moment, the girl entered the room uncalled. She approached and, without seeing the book, said she remembered a woman who always worried about food and talked too much when everything had to be quiet. She gave no names or complex historical references, yet the description matched exactly the real testimonies of those who had lived with Augusta. The mother closed the book with trembling hands. Such a coincidence could not be chance. The incidents continued to accumulate. Several times, upon hearing footsteps in the building's hallway, the girl reacted with controlled fear. She froze, tensed her shoulders, and looked toward the door as though fearing a sudden entry. It was not a typical childish reaction. It was a learned gesture, as though the body were responding to a threat that did not belong to her current life. During an ordinary visit to the neighborhood bakery, the girl refused a sweet she had always loved. When the father asked in indirect speech why she did not want it, she replied that one must not eat more than necessary, because previously everything was divided among several people and the food was not enough. That sentence struck the parents deeply. They knew that, according to historical records, the annex residents had lived on strict rations in the final months. Yet the most impressive revelation of this period came when the mother found the girl standing in absolute silence before a window. She was gazing out with a melancholy expression. When the mother approached, the girl said that this light reminded her of the moments when she looked at the sky from the window where she wrote. Intrigued, the mother searched for interior photographs of the annex. One showed exactly that window beside the small desk where Anne wrote. Later, when that image appeared by chance on the computer while reviewing family photos, the girl reacted immediately. She approached, touched the screen at the visible upper beam, and said very softly that this beam reminded her of the day when everything was very loud and someone downstairs shouted that everyone had to come down. The mother's throat tightened. Such details did not appear in children's versions of the diary. The testimonies about the arrest described similar scenes, but they were details found only in hard-to-access reports and documents. The girl had not seen those images, had not heard those stories, and yet she reacted as though she had been there. At that point, the parents understood that they were no longer dealing with isolated coincidences. There was a deep coherence in every gesture, every word, every memory the girl revealed. A coherence that could be explained neither by learning, nor influence, nor imagination. It was as though she were reconstructing, step by step, a life marked by captivity, fear, and writing. The parents began to collect everything in a folder: drawings, words, physical reactions, nocturnal episodes. Without realizing it, they became observers of a phenomenon that shattered every rational boundary. And precisely those records, together with the girl's increasingly specific memories, led them to an emotional breaking point that would completely change their view of what was happening. With all the gathered information, the parents sensed that their daughter was reaching a phase in which the memories became clearer and, at the same time, harder to bear. They were no longer just sensations, drawings, or isolated words. Now, complete fragments, deep emotions, and descriptions appeared that seemed to come from a memory foreign to her young age. The turning point came one afternoon when the family decided to visit a local history museum. The girl had never shown interest in such places, but as soon as they entered the main hall, her behavior changed completely. She walked slowly, looking around as though searching for something specific. She did not seem lost or frightened. She moved with the certainty of someone recognizing a familiar setting. At a display case containing everyday objects from the 1930s and 1940s, the girl stopped. Among them was a brown notebook very similar to the one Anne Frank used before her famous diary. The girl stared in silence for several seconds, then placed her palm against the glass as though trying to reach something lost. The mother stood beside her without asking questions.
The girl explained softly that such notebooks reminded her of the one she used before the other one, referring to the famous red and white checkered diary. It was not a random statement. Historically, Anne had indeed used earlier, lesser-known notebooks. The match was too precise. That same day at home, the girl asked for paper and pencil without even removing her coat. She sat on the floor and began writing continuous lines almost automatically. From time to time, she looked up as though trying to recall the exact order of certain thoughts. She did so with a concentration inappropriate for a 5-year-old. When she finished, she set the pencil aside and looked at the sheet as though checking something larger than herself. The mother took the paper and felt a stab in her stomach. Among the clumsy lines appeared words related to cold, fear, hope, and writing. But the strongest was a sentence constructed with difficulty yet clear in intent. The girl had tried to describe the feeling of hiding behind a bookcase that concealed a door. That symbolic element of the secret annex was known only to those who had read the complete testimonies or visited the site. With each incident, the girl showed growing familiarity with situations that far exceeded what she could have learned on her own. Once, while the mother was cutting vegetables in the kitchen, the girl approached with concern. She explained that the smell of hot soup produced in her a mixture of relief and sadness hard to express. According to her, it reminded her of the days when, in her previous life, she shared meager rations with several people in a cramped space. She described it without drama, simply as an inevitable memory. Another afternoon, while looking at family vacation photos, she stopped at the picture of an ordinary, narrow European alley. With controlled anguish, she pointed to the lower part where a metal structure was visible and explained that such alleys awakened an unpleasant memory. The moment when she went down the stairs fearing that uniformed men were waiting below. The parents exchanged glances. There was terrifying clarity in every detail. The girl described persecution, captivity, and fear without ever having been exposed to historical material, without seeing images of the era, without anyone having told her about the arrest of the annex residents. One night, as the mother was tucking her in, the girl stared silently at the wall. Eyes open, yet the expression showed a depth that did not belong to a small child. When the mother asked in indirect speech what she was thinking about, the girl explained that in her memory there was a moment that still made her sad. She remembered writing when she heard heavy footsteps and unknown voices. She did not cry while telling it. She did not seem terrified. She conveyed it like someone reliving a past experience with the calm of acceptance.
Yet the mother felt an unbearable weight listening to that account. In the following days, the girl began to show unexpected interest in simple objects: pencils, paper, heavy curtains, narrow windows, small books. Each seemed to activate a different memory, as though they were loose pieces of a life she could not yet fully order. The final incident that made the parents accept they were not facing ordinary childish behavior occurred on a rainy afternoon. The girl was sitting in her room when a ray of sunlight entered through the window and fell on her desk. She remained motionless, silently observing the glow. Then she explained that this light reminded her of the moments when, in her previous life, she allowed herself to write for a few minutes before someone downstairs made too much noise and everyone was forced into absolute silence. She spoke of it in a tone that mixed nostalgia and resignation. The mother, listening, felt that her daughter was not inventing a story. She was trying to comprehend a memory that belonged neither to her age nor her time. The father, who had always sought rational explanations, also began to feel that the accumulation of details could no longer be attributed to chance. They reviewed the drawings, writings, isolated words, emotional reactions, and spontaneous behaviors once more. Every element fitted precisely into the documented life of Anne Frank, including little-known episodes and fragments present only in specialized sources. That night, the mother placed everything in a folder and set it high on the shelf, as though protecting something fragile and irreplaceable. She did not know how to approach what was happening, but she understood that her daughter was expressing memories that did not belong to the present. The girl, unaware of the weight this carried for the adults, simply lay down, closed her eyes, and, before falling asleep, whispered a string of words in a language she did not fully master. Soft, almost incomplete sounds, yet full of a familiarity that escaped all logic. This final sequence left the parents with the certainty that they were witnessing something that transcended any conventional explanation: the spontaneous manifestation of a previous life that their daughter seemed to remember with impossible clarity.